I'm Dr. Brad Hafford, archaeologist and economic anthropologist. As part of my series Money Talks, I've been looking at specific examples of relatively modern currencies to see what they tell me about the authority that issued them and the people who used them. They've been circulated a great deal, but that means they fulfilled their purpose as economic tools. Those use patterns can tell us something, and as an anthropologist, I like to think about what currency means instead of what its value as a collectible is. Because it tends to have more surface area, paper money typically has many symbols and a good deal of text. My series Note Nook analyzes one example of paper money in each episode. But since there are fewer symbols on coins, I'll compare two examples in each episode of Coin Corner. Today, I'm looking at two very small coins from Russia in the early 20th century. Both are silver and both are 10 kopecks in denomination. We'll begin by looking at the obverse of the first coin. The obverse is often called heads because, in many examples, it bears the image of a ruler or other important person from the country. When there is no head depicted, it can be difficult to know which side was intended to be the obverse, and there are even cases where a portrait occurs on the reverse or on both sides. But the obverse should carry the clearest symbol of the minting authority, be it an image, a symbol, or official text. In this case, the obverse bears the double-headed eagle, an official symbol of the Russian Empire. The symbol was adopted in the 15th century by Ivan III, Grand Prince of Moscow. From 1547, czars ruled the Russian state, and in 1721, Russia officially became an empire. The imperial eagle seen on this coin carries a great many symbols within it, reflecting the long history of Russia. The two heads themselves are said to refer to the vast extent of the country, looking east and west, and some have claimed that they indicate the Russian Empire as successor to two other empires, the Roman and the Byzantine. Whether or not this is true, both heads of the eagle wear crowns, and they are surmounted by a larger crown with flowing ribbon above. This indicates a unification of the whole under a Christian monarchy, as each crown is topped with a Christian cross. In fact, the crowns are sometimes said to represent the Christian Holy Trinity itself. Others say it's a reference to three principalities subjugated to Russia at the end of the 16th century. In the center of the eagle is a shield with the image of St. George slaying the dragon. This is the coat of arms of Moscow, and it was placed on the eagle in the 17th century. It's surrounded by the collar of St. Andrew, adopted by Peter the Great in 1699. Embedded in the wings of the eagle are more coats of arms, these of various principalities encompassed within the empire. And the eagle carries the scepter and the orb in its talons, symbols of power over all of Russia. Flanking the eagle's tail are two letters that look like the Latinate B and C, but they are actually Cyrillic V and S. These are the initials of the mint master, Victor Smirnov. The design of this coin remained the same from 1867 until 1914, with only the initials of the obverse occasionally changing with the change of mint master. Victor Smirnov was the last imperial mint master in St. Petersburg. So now, let's look at the reverse. The coin is struck in metal alignment, meaning we flip it around its vertical axis to achieve proper orientation. As we flip this one, we see that the edge is milled or reeded, meaning there are small indented ridges in it. This was originally a method of protecting the coin from being scraped down to file away the silver before passing the coin along. The back is rather simple in its design, but it still carries important information. At the top we see a sign of authority, the Christian crown, but the reverse of a coin typically emphasizes the circulating value. In this case, it is 10 kopecks, boldly written in a rather formal Cyrillic with emphatic letters. The number 10 is flanked by 6 pointed stars, and there is a geometric embellishment below the word kopek. The denomination and date are surrounded by a wreath with oak leaves on the right and laurel on the left. The oak represents strength and the laurel victory. And of course, we have the date the coin was struck, 1916. Imagine the time. It's the First World War and just prior to the Russian Revolution, so it's a tumultuous time of struggle and strife. But the coin is struck just like all the ones before it, proudly displaying the empire's elements and touting its strength. The Tsar of Russia in 1916 was Nicholas II. He was the last Romanov ruler, as his line would be largely exterminated by the revolution, which began only a year later. Despite being the Emperor of Russia, Nicholas's monogram does not appear on this coin. The design had remained the same since his grandfather Alexander II's reign, with only minor changes, like the mintmaster's initials on the obverse. Here on the reverse, the date would change, of course, but up through 1914, the reverse also bore a mint mark, SPB, and this stood for St. Petersburg. Even though this coin was struck there, there's no mint mark because the city had changed its name. At the end of 1914, St. Petersburg became Petrograd. The Imperial Russian government wanted to remove any indications of German from its country. They were, after all, engaged in a war with Germany. So they took away the Berg of Petersburg, which is German for city, and they replaced it with Grad, Russian for city. They also removed Saint, or the German Sankt, further emphasizing the Russian aspect and making a stronger connection to Peter the Great, a famous Russian Tsar who reigned more than 40 years in the 17th and 18th centuries. The new name Petrograd never received an imperial mint mark, and the coin in this version was only struck from 1915 to 1917. It's a small coin, measuring only 17.5 millimeters in diameter and weighing only 1.8 grams. Made of 50% silver, its value had nonetheless decreased in the war against the dollar, making 10 kopecks only equivalent to around 3 US cents in 1916. Now we'll compare it to a very similar coin, struck only a few years later, but in a very different Russia. We'll start this time with the reverse, as it is so similar. Again, the denomination is clear, but the word kopek is written differently, in a less formal way. 10 is no longer flanked by stars, and there is no embellishment above the date. There is an additional dotted circle surrounding, but the oak and laurel wreath remains. At the top is the biggest difference. In place of the crown, there is now a shining star. The revolution of 1917 had succeeded in removing the emperor, and a crown was no longer an appropriate symbol. Instead, the shining star represents a new beginning and hopeful, bright future. The date is 1922, and the Bolsheviks have assumed power. Workers are at the top of their agenda. The common people would have power according to their ideology. From each according to their ability, and to each according to their need. It's a nice sentiment, but in practice, very difficult to administer. Even money itself was questioned by the new ideology. Was it not an instrument of bourgeois capitalist control? In fact, many Bolsheviks believed they could eliminate money. They found out they could not. Again, as we turn the coin over its vertical axis, we see it has a reeded edge, and it's the same size, weight, and silver content as the imperial version. Symbols on the obverse further reflect the new ideology and regime. At the center is no longer an elaborate two-headed eagle demonstrating ultimate control of the means of production, but now there are symbols of production itself, of the worker and the farmer. The hammer and sickle, soon to be recognized across the world as symbols of communism, cross in the middle of the coin. These are the tools of the worker and the agriculturalist. Behind them are the shining rays of the sun, and flanking them are ears of wheat. The society would be, in representation at least, based on farming and industry. Further emphasizing this thought are the words of the surrounding legend, Proletarii vzech stran sojedinyayetis. Forgive my pronunciation. But it means, workers of the world, unite. And it even includes the exclamation point, one of the few emphatics I've seen on any coin. They really meant it, or they wanted people to believe they did. This became the Soviet state motto, but Russia was not yet the Soviet Union. The coin was issued in an early period of Lenin's control, and instead of what we might recognize as CCCP, which is actually SSSR, or Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, we find the letters RSFSR. This was the abbreviation of the early communist state that took over after the revolution. It stood for Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. The communists may have won the revolution, but they had a very large country to put in order and administer. They gave up on the attempted abolition of money of 1918, and the value of the ruble had already fallen by half from its declining 1916 rate. The State Bank of the RSFSR was established in 1921 to assist the development of industry, agriculture, and trade turnover, but the value of the ruble continued to fall on international markets. Late in 1922, Moscow announced that they would be issuing gold certificates in an attempt to stabilize the currency. 1 ruble was redefined to be 10,000 old rubles. It was revalued again by another factor of 100 in 1923. At that point, the USSR was born, and its coins were no longer silver. I hope you enjoyed looking at these coins with me. I'm Dr. Brad Hafford. Join me again next time on Coin Corner, part of my series, Money Talks.